Okay, so if you're having any trouble, please refresh your browser because I was having a little trouble getting online. And hopefully I'm trying to refresh my browser on my extra computer to make sure. So I'm Alyssa Feick, and you're here to learn about healthy relationships. Yay, okay, and the sound is working, which is even better. So you're here to learn about having healthy relationships and the spiritual laws in the law of correspondence. And the law of correspondence is really important. All the laws, these 7 laws of relationships, are really important. And we went over infinite possibilities in the last webinar. And today we're going over the law of correspondence. Okay. I apologize for being late. I had a little glitchy in my computery, but we fixed it. I'm still working on all the technology. It's kind of interesting, and I trust in it, so I'm just keep on moving. If you are having any problems, I'm going to write a little something in the chat. If you do not see anything, please type fast. Refresh. So if you're having trouble seeing anything at all, refresh your browser. That would be what I would tell you. Okay, so I'm Alyssa Feick, and I have been lining up some amazing experts for this healthy relationship series. I've got people talking about toxic relationships. I have a great speaker speaking about intuitive, how to recognize intuitive hits in toxic relationships, some things around abuse and bullying that I have a great speaker lined up for that. And I'm getting all their information lined up on the website at www.relationshipexpertsummit.com. So go there to see all the people I have lined up for you. Great series, great people who are really passionate about helping people have better relationships on all levels, better relationships at work, better relationships at home with children, with spouses, with partners, with family members, sisters, in-laws, money, physical objects, better relationships with your computer, which I need a new relation. We need to understand each other, my computer and I. Why? Because I still have a relationship with my computer, and everything has energy around it, and we are connected to everything. So you have a relationship with your computer. I know that sounds a little crazy, but you do have a relationship with everything around you. Money is probably your most intimate relationship that you have that affects your life. And that's why we're going to go over the law of correspondence today. So let's dive right into the law of correspondence. So you're here to learn about the 7 spiritual laws that connect you to healthy spiritual relationships. Okay. And the law number 2 is the law of correspondence. And that law of correspondence, that law is very important law. I want you to understand that they're all the laws that we're going to go over are important, but the law of correspondence is kind of a little bit of the glue that sets it all together. So all the spiritual laws, they all work together, and they work separately, right? So they're working together and they work separately. And what that means is the law of correspondence is working with all the other laws, right? So it's coincides and works together with all the other laws, like the law of infinite possibilities that we did last week, or a week ago. That corresponds with this law as well. So they're interconnected. So, but they also work separately. So you have to look at the laws separately and together. This is an important law because it kind of ties a lot of it together. It's attached to the Hermetic law. That's Hermes Trismegistus, and it's spelled kind of the way it sounds, Hermes, Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus, which means 3 times great. If you look up Hermes, Google it, you'll find it. And Hermes talks about as above, so below. As above, so below. So what happens above connects and corresponds to what happens here. What happens inside is what happens outside of us. This correspondence of what happens in the spiritual world affects us here. That correspondence is really important. Hermes has the Emerald Tablet, and if you look up Emerald Tablet online, you'll know, you'll understand a little bit more about it. Just give me a little taste, little nibble of it, because the Emerald Tablet is a perfect connection to the law of correspondence, right? Makes sense? So as above, so below. And all these laws, including this Emerald Tablet and everything that we connect to in the world, corresponds with each other. So what happens on a larger scale, the macrocosm of the world, bigger picture, affects the smaller picture, the microcosm, the tiniest, minute part of us. So let's say on a global scale, what happens in one country can affect other countries, right? Because let's say something big happens, like 9/11 happened in the United States, a big thing, it did affect other countries. And they were, especially countries who are connected to the United States, they were just as traumatized. So it happened on more than one level. It corresponded, it connected it together. So all these laws that we're going to talk about, these spiritual laws of healthy relationships, all these laws are interconnected and intimately connected, interconnected and intimately connected. So when we talk about as above, so below, and as within, so without, as we talk about that, what we're saying is what happens outside affects us inside, and what happens on a larger scale affects us on a smaller scale. So let's go back to, 9/11. When that happened, people started to have more anxiety in life. They were more traumatized. They worried. There was a larger an uprising of depression after that. So what happened outside of us affected us inside, right? So everything is connected. So what happens on the macrocosm of the universe affects us on the microcosm of the smallest cell in our body. What happens outside of us, if we are involved in a traumatizing experience, it will affect us inside. Maybe we'll have anxiety, maybe we'll get depression, maybe we'll get physically sick, right? Because it corresponds on both levels. So this is why it's so important. Because your relationships are a direct reflection of what's happening inside of you. So the old story that you hold on to corresponds to what you experience now. Does that make sense? So what happens outside of you corresponds to what happens inside of you. how you respond to old relationships or how you feel about old relationships will actually correspond to how you experience new relationships. Romantically, at work, at home, with your children. Again, I'm going to say again, with your computer, with money, all of those things. Because we have relationships. You think that a relationship is just between humans. And you know that's not true. Why? You can have a relationship with a dog. You can have a relationship with money. And I'm going to emphasize that because people think that it's a separate thing. But no, it corresponds with your life. Everything's connected. I'm going to say that again and again. You're going to be bored of it after I'm finished. So what happens in your life affects you spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So it corresponds what you experience. Let's say you experience a traumatizing or dramatic event. It will correspond and you'll notice it. And it'll show up inside of yourself. It corresponds, it connects. It will happen spiritually. So let's say you have a spiritual epiphany. Well, there you go. There's an opening right there. Let's say, and all of a sudden now your life changes around you. Okay, so you had a spiritual event that really opened you up. And from there, you've now are experiencing life healthier and mentally more stable and grounded and happier, right? So it corresponded. What happened outside happens inside. What happens inside happens outside. How we perceive our world is how we experience our world. The thoughts and feelings that you put out there into the world actually dictates how you'll experience your world. So as within, how I experience my world within is how I'm going to experience my world without. So if you have trouble, excuse me, if you have trouble feeling good enough about yourself, and you feel kind of like you're not good enough and the things you do aren't good enough, well, you're going to experience that outside. Make sense? So what you experience inside reflects what you experience outside. All of your relationships, including the relationship with yourself, is a direct reflection from the internal dialogue that you have with yourself. So I've heard people say, oh, you know, I'm really good. Like my life is really awesome and everything flows and I'm really in the flow and all things are great. I'm great. It's great. And then they'll start going, yeah. And at work, you know, they did this to me and they're horrible people and I can't stand them. And you know, and they're whining. And then they're like, yeah, my mother, man, I couldn't stand her. She was a bully. And you think, isn't that what I just heard you say about all those people at work? So your interior life is a direct reflection and correlation to what you experience outside of yourself. All of your relationships, people think I have a work relationship, I have a romantic relationship, or I want to have a romantic relationship, I have friendships, I have relationships with siblings, with parents, with children, with, acquaintances. You have all these relationships, and people think they're all separate, but they're not. Because guess what? If you have an issue with your mother, there's a good chance that someone who's in your circle of people, of relationships, is going to somehow channel your mom, and you're going to feel like you're being treated like your mom treats you. Because that's how you're corresponding with the world. It's like your energy is constantly telling the world what you're supposed to be receiving back. So you're saying to the world, I'm supposed to be receiving not feeling good enough, and that's what you receive back. Now, are you consciously saying that? No, of course not. but subconsciously, some level you are. So it's important to understand that all the laws correspond with the spiritual world, right? So all of the laws that we're working on correspond with the spiritual world. And that's why this one's so important. As above, so below. As below, so above. As within, so without. As without, so within, right? So those words are important. Why are they important? Because this is how you correspond with the world around you. You think the world happens to you. It doesn't. You energetically put out with a spiritual vibration what you're going to perceive back. So let's just say, unfortunately, I have to use sometimes myself as an example, and I know it's boring, but I'm going to be really honest. And that's just one thing you're going to learn about me. I'm honest. Like today, when my computer was, it's a long story what happened. It's boring. But when all that stuff was happening, I went, okay, I feel like I'm sabotaging something. What am I sabotaging? Like that's where my thoughts went, because I went, I have to take responsibility to my experience in this moment, that this did not work. Because what is happening within me is a direct reflection on what's happening without. That computer, that is a direct correspondence with what's happening on my computer. Yes. Right? So any questions so far? Please just write your questions in the chat, and I will answer any questions in the chat. Right. So this spiritual world, you're connecting to the spiritual part of you, like you are connecting to the spiritual part of you in this law of correspondence, and you're also connecting to your own spiritual inner self, mental self, emotional self. All those parts of you is directly related to how you're perceiving your universe, how you perceive your life. And it does come down through the spiritual energy realm. Where you are in your life matters. So if you're working on helping your physical self, how are you relating to the world physically? And if you're, how do you relate to the world mentally? How do you relate to the world spiritually? And how do you relate to the world emotionally? All those things are direct correspondence to how you experience your world. Your spiritual practice is really important because of this law. So in your relationships, you can use this as this law as a way to understand who you are as a person on those levels: spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, mental, emotional, and physically, right? So all those levels, you can understand how you respond to the universe and how you respond to your relationships on all those levels, because they all connect together. You can't have just a physical relationship with something or someone. There's always other components to the relationship. You can't just have a spiritual relationship or just an emotional relationship, because they're all interconnected. Now, you may have a stronger part of that relationship, let's say with, a significant other or a partner. You may have at some time more of a physical relationship. Other times it might be more emotional. You can go through a little stronger part in those, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual areas, but all four of them are at work because they're all connecting together. And that's why it is hard for people to have a relationship with someone and start getting really intimate with them emotionally. And sometimes it moves into maybe a physical attraction. Not always, but it can. So there's all these energies that correspond to each other and connect, because it's all interrelated. It's all interrelated. You can work on your spiritual life, your personal development, through working on your relationships, especially the relationship with yourself. It's through these relationships that you're going to evolve as a person. And that's why I started doing this, because what I realized is that, here it is, the health of your relationships, the health of your relationships equals, like a little equal sign, how money responds to you in your life, how your health responds into your life, and how happiness responds to your life. If you leave with nothing today, this is what I want you to leave with. The health of your relationships equals the health of your financial life, your health, and your happiness. Because all of these things, under the law of correspondence, correspond with relationships. We are human. As humans, we are relationships. Like, that is who we are. That's us. We can, unless you are a complete hermit, which nowadays it's kind of almost impossible to be a complete hermit, maybe in remote areas of the world. But most of us, there's no way. Even, you get on Facebook, and even though you're sitting in your room by yourself in front of a computer, you're still developing relationships with people, right? It's kind of cool, but it's interesting. Our relationships are so much more important than we're giving them credit. And we're like, oh, well, I just never liked her. I can never stand my mother. So, I don't care if my relationship with her sucks. Those matter. And the people who I find that have the most difficult relationships in their lives are working on themselves, and they're trying to overcome them. They find a correspondence in other areas of their life. So let's say they have a difficult relationship with their a parent, sibling, somebody from their family that they, quote, grew up with. That will correspond in how they relate to people at work, how they relate to the people in their immediate environment, maybe new family members of in-laws, or family members of, partners, children, in-laws, sister-in-law, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, that kind of thing. They're all interrelated. I really want you to know that all your health of everything in your relationships directly influences your whole existence. What does that mean? Does that mean that we have to get this relationship perfect? No. You have to be aware inside of how you are responding to the world because of your own relationship with yourself. Let's make sure you understand this, that I make sure I'm clear about this. What is within in your relationship with yourself equals the health of the relationships with everyone around you. So the health of your own relationship with yourself directly influences the health of every relationship you have. Now, are you going to have sucky people in your life who aren't very nice, who may bully you, who, may not have your best interest, or were never nice to you as growing up? Well, yeah, of course. I haven't met too many people who don't have those kinds of issues. But the great thing is that you don't have to ignore it. You just need to look inside and see what's stuck in there and move through it, right? So it's through these relationships that we're getting that mirror of correspondence to go, okay, wow, I don't like myself. So let me look inside, see what's in there, see what I need to heal within so that I can have a healthy relationship without. I'll give you, for instance, my mother growing up, I was the youngest of 5, and my mother growing up had a lot of issues. She had a lot of self-esteem issues, a lot. And she and I didn't always see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I may have challenged her a little, and she didn't feel good about who she was. So I knew that. And I'm sure I took advantage of that as a young person to get what I wanted, because that's what we learn. We learn how to respond to the world and how to get what we want through how the world responds back to us. And what I noticed as I got older was she was kind of jealous of my relationship with my father. And we had this weird energy about, we loved each other. Believe me, I love my mom dearly, love her. She's amazing. But we had an odd relationship. It was sometimes tough and it was difficult. And, we had, we butt heads and we'd argue. And when I started to heal around not feeling good enough myself and all the things that she reflected to me and I reflected back to her, once I started to heal all that stuff, my relationship with her healed. And I can't even, my mother is, into her mid 80s now, but even, 15 years ago, I can't remember the last time I had an argument with her or a fight. Now, I could upset her because she sometimes life is too much for her just because of who she is. But we don't argue. Like there's none of that old energy is there, because why is it? What did I change? I looked at myself. I healed the things that were a direct reflection of her. So that correspondence was no longer there, that connection of angst between us, maybe jealousy, anger, not feeling good enough, that was no longer there. So the great thing about this law of correspondence is that as you learn about the law of correspondence and how your inner life reflects your outer life and how your outer life reflects your inner life, you develop your soul or higher consciousness connection, because it slowly chips away the ego's identity around its belief of who it is. And why is that? Because it no longer can have that belief of I'm not good enough. So it chips away that ego belief. So that's why your inner life is so important. What happens is that we get stuck in this loop in our relationships. And this loop creates more angst and more problems in our relationships. And it loops over and over and over again. So as we, like the not good enough loop, I'll give you an example so that you understand what I mean by this. We get stuck in this loop. So I was stuck from my mother, obviously, I most likely inherited and then learned it on top of it, was I'm not good enough, right? So this loop was happening with me of I'm not good enough. And then people around me would reflect that back to me. You're not good enough. And then I would think, I'm not good enough. And then the teacher would say, why didn't you get this done? Why didn't you do this? Or a friend would diss me and play with someone else, or right. So that not good enough loop would reflect back to me. And then I would reflect it out, and then it would reflect back, because it's so intertwined. It's so interconnected that it's like you can't live your life without a reflection reflecting back to you. So that you're stuck in this loop, And then what happens is that loop, as you get older, starts to correspond to all of the relationships around you. Now, I get it. I'm sure you have some good relationships with people at work, and you have good relationships maybe with your significant other or partner, or you may have a really great relationship with a sibling, but I'm sure there are some toxic relationships in your life. And people will think, well, I don't understand why I can't find my soulmate or the love of my life or my ideal partner, and they wonder why they can't. But then they look at their relationships. They're still holding on to the anger with their mother who's been dead for 10 years. Well, if you haven't healed that relationship, it's going to correspond and reflect out to other relationships, which is then in turn will reflect back in, right? Because all the health of every relationship that you have will correspond, right? And directly influence your money, health, and happiness. Everything. Nothing is out of sorts. It reflects your relation. If you own a company, it will reflect the relationship you have with your company. Yes, you have a relationship with your company. If you work for AT&T, it will reflect the relationship that you have with AT&T. Yeah, all of them, everything. People think it's just relationship with a human to human, but it's a relationship with your environment, relationship with money, relationship with all the vibrational frequencies and energies around you, everything. That can be exhausting, right? Think about that. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of things. Every vibrational frequency I put out, I get back. So what does that mean? For you, it means clear your chakras. And if you if you don't know how to do that, go to my website, which I'll put up on the chat. If you don't know how to work with your chakras and clear them really clearly and work with them so that you have healthy chakras, go to my website, go into products, and download my downloadable chakra clearing. It will, it's not, don't just do the meditation, get the whole thing, because you really want to understand all the chakras and your energy field. The clearer your energy field, the clearer you're going to have an experience of health and love and healthy vibrations that will reflect back to you. Make sense? So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to make sure I mentioned. All right. I don't want to bore you saying the same thing over and over again. But if you have any questions, please ask me now, because we're probably going to end in about 2 or 3 minutes. And if you're watching the replay, you can shoot me a message. It will actually come through. You can put it in the chat and it will come through. Our healthy relationships matter. And if you are looking for a soulmate or having trouble with what you would consider a soulmate, I have a different probably definition of soulmate than you do, but if that's a terminology that we use often now. If you are looking or having trouble with your soulmate, I would like you to take a few minutes and look inside and look at what you might be reflecting out that might be where the problem lies. And instead of blaming that person isn't, they're not working on themselves, or that person isn't giving enough of themselves, or I thought they were this way, but they're really not. Take a look inside, because your experience is going to reflect outward, and your outward experience is going to reflect inward, right? So if nobody has any questions, I had so many questions before. Okay. I want to put this one up again. So, as within, so without, right? And that matters. So what happens within is a direct reflection to what happens without, what happens above. And when I first learned that as above, so below, as a below, so above, which was what it used to be, or that's the law, and that's how I was taught. That law under Hermes Trismegistus, under the Emerald Tablet, was very important because it is a reflection of how you experience your world. So what happens energetically to you will correspond and then reflect into your physical world. What happens emotionally to you will correspond to what happens on a physical level. What happens on a physical level will affect you emotionally, right? Make sense? So it's obvious that your energy is being put out there, and your energy is reflecting back to you what your life is. Make sense? Okay. So on July 9th, if you're watching the replay, that definitely join us on July 9th, which is a Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have Jody Johnston Powell come work with us dealing with difficult people. And you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family or coworkers. Most families and business teams are dysfunctional somehow, and almost everyone knows someone that they dread seeing. And we're going to, Jody's going to help us learn how to deal with those difficult people in our lives and the ones that are just like getting our goat. So I'm so excited. Next week, we'll be talking to Jody, and I hope that you will join us then. And in the meantime, I'm Melissa Feick. You can find me at melissafeick, FEICK.com. And you have amazing, beautiful, strong, prosperous, abundant day, week, year. Because what you put out there is what is going to come on back. So let's put out there that the world is awesome, that great things happen to us, and that no matter what, we're in perfect alignment with our soul's energy and our higher consciousness, and everything that we put out there is experienced and responds back to us. Have a great day.